Welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli, and it is now 9:08 p.m. in a very dark and miserable Budapest. When on days like these, you kind of remember Hungary's very dark history, and all the grim things that Hungarians had to endure um, throughout the 20th century. So that's what these kinds of short, almost evanescent days in Hungary remind me of. However, on the positive note, thank you everybody who has joined me here on our live stream, and it's now 3:10 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States. I don't know if anyone actually caught Biden's statement at the White House, in which he talked about Trump's election victory. You can't but notice Biden's gleefulness. He seemed in an awfully good mood, and you think he was clearly very satisfied that the plot to overthrow him, engineered by Obama, by Nancy Pelosi, by Chuck Schumer, that plot has failed. And Biden, he's the classic case of the Irish amnesiac who forgot everything except his grudges. He hasn't forgotten his grudge over 2016 when Obama, as president, did something very unusual, which is that he refused to support the candidacy of his vice president and instead supported the candidacy of Hillary Clinton. But Biden has not forgotten that. And then Biden will obviously cherish this moment that the plot to oust him achieved nothing. And to the contrary, and as we discussed in the podcast yesterday with Peter, in almost all cases, in almost all categories, Biden did better than Harris did. He did better among women than Harris did. He did better among minorities than Harris did. So it was an all-round failure of this plot, and so therefore Biden feels very satisfied and feels vindicated, because he will say, I'm the only person who has succeeded in defeating Donald Trump, and I would have beaten him this time as well. He'll say Kamala Harris never had a shot at beating him, and he did. This was a wholly misconceived exercise, because if they were going to push Biden aside, and there was plenty of justification for pushing Biden aside, then they should have done it long ago. They should have done it really after the 2022 midterms, and say to him, you did promise that you would be a one-term president. It's time to step aside. They didn't do any of that, probably because they were very smug and they were convinced that that Trump wouldn't pose any kind of a danger. They didn't even think Trump would win the GOP nomination, and that even if he did win the GOP nomination, all of the criminal cases and the civil cases would just simply weigh him down so much that he wouldn't be able to pose any serious challenge. And that wasn't such a wholly unreasonable take, because the Conservatism Inc., the sort of represented by the Wall Street Journal editorial page, by National Review, and the rest of them, all went around saying month after month after month, Donald Trump has no chance of winning. He has no chance of winning. and therefore he's the weakest of all of the Republican candidates. Any Republican candidate would be able to beat Joe Biden, with the exception of Donald Trump. And this was said by, as I say, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, Andrew McCarthy at National Review. They went on and on and on repeating this. And so it's not surprising that the Democrats were convinced that Biden wouldn't have too many problems defeating Trump. Well, they made a serious miscalculation. And then once they made that, particularly after the shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania, and then the following week was the Republican convention, they decided then that they're in real trouble. They were in desperate trouble. Trump had taken a decisive lead in the polls. Trump had clearly, shown himself to be a courageous individual in the face of an assassin's bullet, and they thought there was no way in the world that Biden. That was really the first moment they realized that there was just no way Biden could win this, and then they scrambled around to find another solution. The problem was that I think that their analysis was correct. I don't think Biden could have won this election. But then they needed to find some way to select a successor in some more democratic way. But by inserting Harris, who was very unlikable, who had done very poorly in the primaries in 2020, that was just a disaster. And they should have thought of that, finding some mechanism where the party would have some say as to whom they wanted to choose as their as their nominee. The problem, of course, is that the party leaders in the Democratic Party have no faith in the party itself, because they're convinced that if they leave it, the party to its own devices, if they just allow the party supporters, the party activists to decide who the nominee will be, then they'll always choose somebody like Bernie Sanders. And that's why they had to stop the party in 2016. That's why they created all these mechanisms like the super delegates to make sure that the Democrats don't choose somebody like Bernie Sanders, and before that, George McGovern. And they still have nightmares about what happened when the party was allowed to choose George McGovern. So that was the difficulty. If they were going to allow the party to decide whom to run against Trump in those few weeks between the GOP convention and the Democrat convention, just in those few weeks, it's probable the party would have gone for Bernie Sanders. They would not have gone for Gretchen Whitmer or Josh Shapiro or Gavin Newsom. They would have probably gone for Bernie Sanders again, and they couldn't have that. I'm not even sure, incidentally, that Shapiro or Whitmer or Newsom would have been that great. I'm not at all sure that they would have defeated Trump. I think the state of the economy, and that people had quite good memories of the Trump years, I think would have pushed Trump over the line. And all the rest of the stuff about Trump's personality, he's a dictator, he's a fascist, and all that. I mean, if they try, people were obviously not buying that. Now the question is, what happens now? And I have to say, I mean, just before we started, I saw this picture, which I have to say was quite a repugnant, really, really disgusting picture. I was shocked by how disgusting this picture was. It was a picture of Douglas Murray at Mar-a-Lago chatting with Donald Trump. Now, Douglas Murray is one of those vile neocons there is, one of those vile shills for Israel that there is. And I wondered, what the hell was Douglas Murray doing at Mar-a-Lago? What's he doing chatting with Trump? And this, of course, does raise the question of, what Trump is going to do. Now, we have Netanyahu, who tweeted out a very warm congratulation to Trump. And I mean, I still like to think, and I don't, this is maybe just hope triumphing over experience. It's a very forlorn hope, but nonetheless, it's a hope that Trump will be sensible and will not make the mistake of continuing these wars, because and you could even in today's media coverage on CNN say they're already preparing to blame the wars in the Middle East and in Ukraine. They're preparing to blame them on Trump, and that's really, if Trump decides to continue with these wars, then I think it's going to be a real disaster for him, because the media will not hesitate, absolutely will not hesitate, within hours of his becoming president, to blame him personally for these wars. Everyone will forget about Biden and Harris and Blinken and all the rest. They will say, no, this is Trump's war. Trump is responsible for this war in the Middle East. Trump is responsible for the war in Ukraine, because Trump had promised to end it. I mean, if Trump had promised, he said Trump will end it before he even becomes president. I'm not at all sure how he could even do that, because if he were to try to engage in some kind of a mediation or negotiation between now and January the 20th, they would immediately cry, Logan Act! Logan Act! It's a Logan Act violation. You can't do that. You can't start conducting your own foreign policy. I mean, it's what they did in 2016 against Michael Flynn. So I don't know how he can do that. But if, his idea that somehow Israel can just finish off this war without any problems, and that somehow the only thing that's holding Israel back is the Biden administration. I'm sorry, but I'm not buying that thesis for one moment. I mean, that's a nice idea by the neocons, by the Douglas Murray and the rest of them. If Israel were capable of bringing this war to an end, Israel would have brought this war to an end. If Israel had the abilities, the wherewithal to bring it to a conclusion, a successful conclusion, Israel would have done so. So I think that Israel is not capable of doing so, and that's why if Trump, were to say to Netanyahu, which is what Trump has been saying this time, well, you better just go in and finish the job, as if it's that easy, then I think it's wrong-headed, and Israel won't be able to finish the job. And if the scenes of carnage that will ensue if Netanyahu decides to launch ferocious offensives in Gaza, and then those, I mean, up until now, the media have I mean, they have criticized Israel, but they've been relatively restrained in their criticism because of Biden. They didn't really want to tarnish Biden with these scenes of carnage. But they won't hesitate. They will not hesitate. If there are scenes of carnage, if they, Israel blows up hospitals, Israel blows up tents, kills women and children, every single killing by Israel will be Trump. It'll be Trump who has killed these children. It'll be Trump who has blown up this hospital. It'll be Trump that has destroyed this encampment. They will not hesitate, but blame Trump for everything Israel does. So therefore, if Trump goes down this path of telling Israel, "Hey, do whatever you got to do," then whatever Israel gets to do, it's not Israel who's going to carry the can. Trump personally, will do it. I mean, all these creatures who are today seething with rage and disappointment over Trump becoming president. I mean, this will be absolutely golden opportunity to blame Trump for everything that Israel does. So the war in Gaza will be, within 2 hours of his becoming president, will be Trump's war. Everything Israel does, it's actually Trump who did it. Trump is responsible for all of Israel's crimes. So he's got to consider that, whether that's what, because that's the fastest way to lose popularity. Now, that's the course that will be advocated by people like this horrible creature, Douglas Murray. It's quite sickening because I don't even know who invited Douglas Murray to Mar-a-Lago. I mean, it's not clear to me what the connection is, what the link is between Douglas Murray and Trump. There's somebody there. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage was there. Right? I don't know whether Farage and Douglas Murray are particularly close. I don't know. But that maybe it was Farage who kind of got Douglas Murray there. But nonetheless, that's quite a disgusting sight. Now the same thing goes for Ukraine. Now here, there is a slight difference, I think, because with Israel, the people around Trump and people generally on the right of the Republican Party, and the people who comprise Trump's national security advisors are fervently pro-Israel. They're absolutely fervently pro-Israel. I think they will urge Trump to go all in with Netanyahu, support Netanyahu wholeheartedly. They probably do think that the reason why Israel hasn't yet succeeded is that the Biden administration has tied Israel's hands behind its back. If only Biden had given Israel a blank check, Israel would have finished the job, got rid of Hamas, and settled the whole thing. It's all Biden's fault that Israel hasn't accomplished these goals. So they're the people around Trump, and they will urge him to take a very aggressive line on Gaza. Now that's very different when we come to Ukraine, because most of Trump's circle, most of the people around Trump, the national security people around Trump, they're not at all enthusiastic about Ukraine. To them, this is just a stupid war. Trump himself, thinks that it makes very little sense to push Russia and China together. Trump considers China to be the main threat to the United States, and so therefore, why double your enemies? Why push Russia and China together? Russia should be our ally against China. I think that's probably how Trump thinks, and I think some of the people around him think the same. And so they probably would like to see the war in Ukraine come to a speedy end, and therefore they will push Trump to do what he can to bring this war to an end. Now that becomes very difficult, because if one tries to speculate, but what will Trump do about Ukraine? He has to do something. There's no question. He has to do something. I mean, he's promised he's going to wrap it up in one day, so he has to do something. And I mean, I assume that he will do what mediators do. He'll go to Putin and say, okay, don't tell me what your maximum demands are, what you would like to see happen. What will you settle for? What's the minimum that you will settle for? And then he'll do the same thing to Zelensky. He'll say, okay, don't tell me, what your maximum demands are, like NATO membership, Ukraine back to the 1991 borders. That's not on. What will you settle for? And then he will try to, once he has these two proposals as to what the minimum that each side would settle for, he'll try to find some halfway house and try to impose that on both sides. Now, if either side or either or both sides refuses to accept what Trump proposes, then he can threaten. Now, his threats against Russia, I think, are limited because I mean, what can he threaten Russia with? He can threaten Russia with bombing Russia with it, but that's that's a dangerous course for Trump to take. I mean, so in other words, if he says to Russia, well, we're going to remove all restrictions on Ukraine on the use of weapons, deep inside Russian territory, well, that's a very dangerous course of action. I mean, he's already had a warning from Putin rather, that Russia would regard that as an act of war if you do that. And I don't know whether Trump really wants to get into a war with Russia really within a few months of his becoming president. In other words, he will confirm the worst fears about Trump's impulsiveness. So, but I mean, that's a possibility. He could, he could indeed say, if Russia refuses to accept the terms that I'm offering, I will do this. But that's risky. He could then say that well, if you refuse to accept my terms to Russia, I will send everything I've got to Ukraine. But that has a limited leverage because America's already sending pretty much everything it's got to Ukraine. I mean, everything short of nuclear weapons. And I don't think Trump is going to, hand over nuclear weapons to Ukraine. He has more leverage over Zelensky because ultimately with Zelensky, he could say, well, if you don't accept my terms, we're just going to cut you off. We're not going to give you anything. That's it. We're not going to give you any more arms. We're not going to give you any more money. We're not going to provide you with diplomatic support. That's it. You're done. So I think he has leverage there. He could also offer an incentive to both sides. So in other words, just simply like with Ukraine, he says, look, I mean, I would think that he's going to say what his peace plan will involve will be some kind of a ceasefire along the lines of contact. And in other words, Ukraine doesn't get its territory back, but the territory it's lost. On the other hand, Russia doesn't get the Donbass because Russia isn't in occupation of the Donbass. And then he could provide an incentive to Zelensky and say, well, we're going to keep giving you money. We're going to keep pouring in arms so that down the road, you could start this whole thing up again. And that's a classic kind of American ploy, which is, okay, well, we'll kind of settle for a ceasefire along these lines, but we're going to keep providing you with weapons. I mean, that's what Clinton did in Bosnia-Herzegovina in 1995 at the time of Dayton, which is, well, look, he went to Izetbegovic and said, no, you're not going to get a unitary state. That's just not on. We're not going to support you, fighting this endless war. But you'll have to settle for a partition state, but we will keep providing you with lots and lots and lots of weapons, which means it's a source of money for a corrupt elite. And that's more or less what it's what America planned to do in South Vietnam. The problem in with South Vietnam, why that didn't really work, is that Congress, in a really mean, vicious, spiteful turn, um, just went, terribly against South Vietnam and just simply said, blame South Vietnam for the debacle, the American debacle, and just simply cut off all arms for South Vietnam, which was kind of surprising again, because again, the debacle was America's debacle. It was America who had made a complete hash of Vietnam. I mean, the Americans had taken over the fighting. There was no reason whatever why Americans should have taken over the fighting in Vietnam. That was Johnson's decision. It led obviously to disaster, but somehow Congress just turned on South Vietnam and then refused to provide any arms at all, which basically undermined any prospect that the partition could have succeeded. So yeah, but but on the other hand, America did that in Korea. So there was a partition, and they kept providing arms to South Korea. So Trump could offer that to say, look, settle for this, for a ceasefire or lines of contact, and then we'll keep pouring in arms, lots and lots of arms, and Ukraine. So the corrupt elite that runs Ukraine can go on making money just selling the stuff off on the black market and keep asking for more weaponry. Trump could also go to Russia and provide an incentive and say, we will lift some of the sanctions that we have imposed. That might be hard because Congress wouldn't go for it. There's no way the Congress would go for lifting any sanctions on Russia. But there may be some sanctions that he can do through executive action. They're not all dependent on Congress. So those are possibilities. I think he's going to do that. I think he will. He's going. That will be his plan. I think a ceasefire along the line of contact. I think he'll provide incentives to Ukraine, lots and lots of arms, and I think he'll try to provide an incentive to Russia with some lifting, whatever sanctions he can lift without going to Congress. I think he'll try to lift. And as for NATO membership, well, Trump has no interest in NATO membership. He says, look, this is fairly pointless. We're never going to get this through. We'll never get a unanimity among NATO members for Ukraine inside NATO. And in any case, you don't really need it because you've signed all these bilateral agreements with the United States, with the UK, with France, with Germany. You've got these bilateral agreements already pouring in arms into Ukraine and promising Ukraine that should Russia attack again, they will do whatever they need to do according to the terms of their bilateral agreement, and that's more or less what NATO membership gives you. I mean, NATO membership doesn't mean, well, everyone in NATO goes to war against the country that has attacked a NATO member state. It just means each NATO member state will make a decision according to what it can do, whether it will do it, and in what way, and when, and how. But basically, there's no obligation to go to war for on behalf of any NATO member state. So essentially, Ukraine, in getting all these bilateral agreements, it already has a de facto NATO membership. So I think Trump could say that to Zelensky, and then you say, look, we can't go on supporting your ambition to take back territory. I mean, what territory you've lost, you've lost. I mean, you can go on fighting, but this fight is just going to be desperate. You're going to keep losing men, and Russians are going to losing men. It means the war would just simply go on and on and on. I mean, and it's clear that neither side at this stage really has the ability to bring this war to any kind of a successful conclusion. So I think he'll say, look, we'll you've got these bilateral commitments. We're going to keep pouring in arms, and then who knows what happens down the road? You never know what Putin might not be there for that long, and you never know. Now the question is, that if that doesn't work, if that plan does not work, and if the war goes on, then Trump has the same problem with Ukraine that he has with the war in Gaza, which is it's Trump's war. And then every day that the war continues, every day that something is blown up, will be on Trump, and he'll get blamed for that. And so therefore he has the he has the same issue, which is you have two wars that are his, wars that he wasn't really responsible for. He never started those wars. They were all cooked up by the Biden administration, but he will get the blame for it. And I don't know that Trump really wants. I mean, if Trump wants to be a transformational president, I mean, he seems to, the Trump now seems to be quite ambitious about the things he wants to get done. All the various things, dismantling the administrative state and so on. Getting the American economy moving again, getting dealing with these with the Justice Department, and so on. He has, he seems to have a full agenda, but he's not going to be able to do any of that if he's bogged down in these two wars. So he has every incentive to bring the wars to an end. The problem, I think, that he faces is, I think the Ukraine one is the one that's most doable. And again, I don't know whether he will get it done, because because there are going to be powerful forces within Congress, and within the national security bureaucracy that will hinder any American attempt to just bring this war to an end, and essentially tell Ukraine, that's it. I mean, we're not going to go on underwriting this war. You don't have the means to defeat Russia, and the only way you can defeat Russia is if we get involved ourselves and we fight this war for you. We're not going to do that, so therefore it just doesn't seem to make any real sense to continue this war. So I think that's doable, but it's going to but very difficult. The Israel one, I think, is not doable. I think that's going to be a much more of a serious problem for Trump, because I think the people around him are very, very pro-Israel, and they're not going to accept any attempts to apply pressure against Israel, and I think that's going to be a real problem for him, because then, as I say, every single massacre, every single destroyed hospital, every single burned child will be on Trump. These are Trump's victims. You get a historic victory. You lose that very, very quickly. You're in an unsuccessful war. Boom. Where's your mandate? Buddy. I mean, look. I mean, I've seen so many of these big historic election victories dissolve within about a year or two. I mean, Lyndon Johnson succeeded in that massive landslide in '64. within a couple of years, he was an extraordinarily unpopular president. And by 1968, 4 years later, he was so unpopular that he couldn't even attend his own party's convention. Um, you know, it wasn't with Nixon. It wasn't quite that, but again, he got a historic landslide. Again, wow, who would have dreamt that Richard Nixon could win 49 states? Yet, 18 months later, he's resigning. And I'm just thinking again of Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich with the Reagan 84 landslide was pathetic. I mean, it was one of those. He ran this vacuous campaign, Morning in America. 149 states. Beloved avuncular figure. Within less than 2 years, he was embroiled in Iran-Contra, and with a real chance that he could get impeached. And then again, it's like with Newt Gingrich, he gets this historic, wow, the Republicans have finally, after 40 years, they won the House of Representatives. And then again, within a few years, he departs ignominiously with the impeachment against Clinton, which kind of brought him down, because he himself was engaging in all kinds of extracurricular sexual activities. So I don't know. I'm just saying that we're talking today about these historic landslides. His historic transformation of America. He's got a new coalition, and so on and so on and so on. Within a few months, this could go very, very sour if he's not able to wrap up these wars in short order. They will be his wars. Anyway, let's take a look at our locals page. This is our locals supporters, and we're always, our members, our local members, people, particularly people who subscribe, and it's really, we're very much appreciative. So let's take a look at what's going on our locals page. So we have Danaki, always good to see you, says Kedvesh George. So the polls lie to us again with their neck and neck BS. But do you feel we should really curb our enthusiasm and wait to see if he once again nominates Ziocons like the likes of Pompeo and others and other creatures, the never drain swamp, and considering Kushner is once again in charge of appointments? This does not bode well. I think you're right. I think that's we have to watch this. But Pompeo was one of the few figures within the Trump's first term who was loyal to him. And let's keep in mind that January the 6th of 2021, that was not a good day for Trump. There was a number of people who resigned, opportunists, awful opportunists who resigned on that day or immediately afterwards in disgust with Trump. And you have to think, though, that if Pompeo, his Secretary of State, had resigned at that moment, Trump would have been in real trouble. I think that could have. He was impeached, but at least he managed to hold the line and wasn't convicted. But if Pompeo, Secretary of State, that's probably one of the most senior positions, and then Mnuchin, who was the Treasury Secretary, if one or the other of them had resigned in disgust with Trump, I think Trump would have been toast. I think Trump would have been probably forced to resign himself before the January the 20th, and I think he would have been convicted. So Trump probably feels that he owes Pompeo, that somehow the fact that Pompeo didn't resign kind of staunched the crisis that he was then facing. So that would suggest that he might give Pompeo another shot. But I don't know. I mean, Pompeo's already been Secretary of State. I mean, what else is he going to do? I mean, I guess he could be uh, Secretary of Defense. But I don't know. I mean, he could just have Pompeo as some kind of an advisor. I don't know whether Trump would necessarily want to go with the same team that he had during his first term. But I take your point. As I say, when I saw that picture of Trump, having engaging in a friendly conversation with Douglas Murray. I mean, that's a disgusting sight, if ever there was one. At Mar-a-Lago, and I'm wondering, well, who the hell invited Douglas Murray to Mar-a-Lago? Yeah, I mean, that's you have to really worry about that. Absolutely worry about that. These creatures are going to be around Trump, and they are fervently pro-Israel, like Douglas Murray. They're fervently pro-Israel, and they're going to push Trump to give Netanyahu a blank check. And as I say, I'm not at all sure Netanyahu can bring this war to any kind of a successful conclusion, which means, yeah, as I said, it'll be Trump's war. So, I do worry about that. But in terms of the team that he's going to put in place, his national security team, I tend to think it's going to be new. It won't be the retreads from his first term. I may be wrong, but I tend to think he's going to have somebody like Kash Patel as maybe as his national security advisor, or maybe his CIA chief. I tend to think that he will maybe bring on Tom Cotton as his defense secretary. Maybe this guy, I can see his face. The guy who was his ambassador to Germany. Well, I mean, there's two people at the ambassador. I mean, McGregor could be brought in at a senior level. I'm not sure, but I mean, Douglas McGregor will be brought in as senior level. But then I was thinking of the other guy who after his stint as ambassador to Germany, then became his director of national intelligence. The gay guy who is part of his circle. John Ratcliffe, I think, will be in that mix. So I think he's going to have his own team there. So I don't know whether he necessarily wants Pompeo. But I think with all of those people, I mean, as you list them, whether it's McGregor, I think, is different from that, because McGregor is skeptical about both Ukraine and Israel. So if he appoints McGregor in a senior position, then McGregor could exert some influence on the issue of Israel. But somebody like Kash Patel will, he's very supportive of Israel. He's kind of another one of these creatures who's hysterical about Iran. So yeah, but Kash Patel will certainly be a voice urging, that the Ukraine war be brought to an end. It's a mixed bag. I mean, as I say, if you bring on McGregor, that he will immediately come into confrontation with the pro-Israel lobby. There's also the prospect that Tucker Carlson could be brought into the administration. Again, Tucker Carlson, skeptic on both Ukraine and Israel. So he may exert some influence, pushing Trump away from Israel. Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk, he certainly had his he got burnt on Israel. On the other hand, he may harbor some grudges as to how he was treated by Netanyahu and the Israel lobby. So he also may urge Trump basically not, pull the plug on Israel. I mean, I don't think America will ever pull the plug on Israel, but in some ways, tell Netanyahu enough already. We're not going to keep supporting this carnage. Um, so I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, if he does surround himself with people like Tom Cotton and Pompeo, then there's no hope. Well, Marco Rubio, and these are people were being discussed as his as kind of his national security team. They're terrible. But as I say, I mean, McGregor, he's not so bad. Tucker Carlson, again, like it could go the other way. So we we really don't know at this stage. I think, as I say, I think Ukraine is more doable. That doesn't mean that he's going to get it done, but I think Ukraine is, an easier step to make, because I think it's more or less a consensus among Trump's people that this makes no sense to continue with this war in Ukraine. I think Israel is one that is going to be much more difficult. And again, if Trump does go down that path, then I think it's going to be bad for him. And as I say, if it's bad for him, then it's the end of his that his historic victory. Like by spring and summer, that this election victory, will just be ancient memory. No one will remember it, and he'll be heading for defeat in the midterms. So when you get a big win, you want to exploit this. You want to basically make the most of it, because things change quickly in politics. In no time at all, you're heading for election defeat. Anyway, but Kushner, I mean, he's Trump has kind of hidden Kushner and Ivanka from view. But they were there on election night. I hadn't seen Ivanka in a while. It was quite disgusting having to see her. And Jared was there, so that'll be it'll be interesting if they make their return. That's not going to go down well. They were not a good influence on him. Anyway, thank you, Dunake. Robert, thank you so much for your generosity. Really appreciate that. So speaking of Robert, I have to remember New Jersey. After this election, we should note that Trump lost in New Jersey by less than 5 points. That is almost unheard of. It's like almost New Jersey is within reach. So that's kind of that's an interesting. I mean, he lost in Illinois by single digits. He lost Illinois by 8 points, but losing New Jersey by less than 5 points, that's something. I mean, remember he won Florida and Texas by something like 13 points. And then, he lost in New York by just 10 points, and then New Jersey by less than 5. That's a remarkable result. So in other words, he's suddenly eating into the into the blue states. And again, I mean, this is your opportunity if you want to continue with that and to keep attacking blue states like New Jersey. You got to end these wars. If you don't, New Jersey will be as far away as ever for him. Anyway, Robert says, hard to see how you could have asked for more. Trump won both the popular vote, yep, and the electoral college vote, deserving of the term landslide, yep. The one minor blemish on an otherwise joyous occasion was the election. Yeah, it's true. Was the election of one of the Vindman creatures. Yeah, that's the brother, the twin brother. Yeah, he won the 7th district of Virginia. From the map, the district appears to be nothing more than DC suburb, entitling one to say, so what? Yeah, I agree. And he didn't win by such a huge margin. I mean, he won, but it wasn't such a huge margin. But you're absolutely right. I had hoped that the Vindman twin would lose. Yeah, that was terrible. But I think that the interesting thing is now there's still some outstanding results. I mean, which we still haven't got the Kerry Lake in Arizona. She seems to be making up ground, but I don't know. I mean, she was making up ground in the gubernatorial race in 2022, and she failed in the end. So I don't know whether she's going to win the Senate seat uh, in Arizona. So, but that's one to watch for. But as I say, I mean, everything that you said is correct, which is he wins the popular vote. That's a big thing for him to do because it undercuts the arguments that have been used against him on MSNBC and CNN. Oh yeah, but that's because of the racist electoral college system. He really, if we had a majority vote, he wouldn't have won. It's a very stupid argument, incidentally. I mean, it's stupid on its own terms because if America switched over from the electoral college to a popular vote, it's by no means certain that the Republicans wouldn't win. I mean, the only reason that Republicans regularly lose the popular vote is that they don't bother to campaign in the various populous state, which always go for the Democrats. So they don't bother to campaign in California. They don't bother to campaign in New York. They don't bother to campaign in New Jersey and Illinois, because it's just a waste of time and money. They're going to go for the Democrats, and so every election is always focused on the battleground states. That's the only thing that matters. If you switched over to the popular vote, then the Republicans would automatically do much better in places like New York and California. They would actually pour in money, resources into New York and California, and they would do much better in New York and California. And people there, knowing that that what counts as the popular vote, they would actually bother to vote. I mean, why bother to vote if you're a Republican in California? You don't bother to vote because why? What's the point? The Democrats are going to win, so you don't bother to show up. If, however, you tell them, hey, you better show up because the election is now based on who wins the popular vote, then they're gonna show up. So that argument that somehow, oh, it's undemocratic, we have the electoral college, if only we counted by the popular vote. Well, if you change the rules, you're going to have a different kind of a result, and the Republicans might actually do much better with on the popular vote, rather than an electoral college vote. But in this case, you're right. I mean, Trump won both, and therefore it undercuts that MSNBC argument. Oh, it's all the racist electoral college system. So yeah, that was a very you're right. It was a very good night. I mean, because he pulled this off. Despite everything that that had happened to him, and he seemed much more, in his acceptance speech, he was much more self-assured. I mean, I remember in 2016, he seemed a little shocked by winning. I mean, he just, I don't think he was expecting to win on election night, so he was a little shocked and he didn't quite know what to say. But here he seemed much more self-assured and therefore knew what to say. So yeah, but yeah, your point about Vindman, is right, unfortunately. Anyway, thank you so much, Robert. Really appreciate your generosity. W. Baker, again, thank you so much. Thank you for your generosity. He says, let's keep an eye on the House. There's a lot of skullduggery going on in those elections. We're going to be asked to believe that Trump won a congressional district, but the Dem House candidate won as well. That's a very good point. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think people are not paying sufficient attention to that. Yeah, I mean, if you get something like that somehow, Trump wins a district, and then the Democrat wins that district. It's not plausible. It's not plausible. You don't get it. You don't have the split voting these days. I mean, there used to be the kind of the split vote when people were very fond of their congressman or they're fond of their senator, so they split. Okay, we'll vote for so and so for president, but I'll vote for this congressman. But that doesn't happen anymore. You don't get this vote splitting. So when you get something like that, then absolutely, there's something anomalous. Speaking of anomalies, let's not forget the anomaly of the 81 million votes that Biden won. Remember, the Biden wins 81 million. So Obama got 65 million. Uh, is it? Yeah, 65 million for Obama. Hillary Clinton got 62 million. And then Biden mysteriously got 81 million in 2020. And now, the Democrats are back to the sort of the 66, 67 million. So what happened to those votes? That sudden burst of voter enthusiasm for Biden. 81 million votes. No one had ever heard of anyone getting 81 million votes, but apparently that's what Biden got in 2020. No one's even looking at that. I mean, because if you really were to look at it, then it's going to raise all sorts of questions, obvious questions about what happened in 2020 and the mass mailing of ballots without any kind of a check as to whether they were sent to people who really exist. That didn't die 100 years ago. So the 81 million is just it sticks out. It's normally it's a national embarrassment of how suddenly you have these consistent Democrat votes, and suddenly, whew, 2020, 81 million, and then the Democrats go back to the same, the 66, 67 million. But you're absolutely right about the congressional races. That's a serious issue. Cynthia, well, it was very good to see you, Cynthia. Who says, Cynthia asks, with Trump back in office, I'm hoping for the best in terms of immigration. I think inflation and the economy are going to be hard to wrestle, but there might be ways to slow this bleeding. The debt is still an elephant in the room. I'm not excited about being cozy with Israel. No, that's to put it mildly. Yet happy that at least the Ukraine fiasco can probably be wound down. Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic that Vance might be an adequate insurance policy if need be the case. No, I think that's absolutely right. I think first, I mean, just going back to your last point, Vance is a good insurance policy. I mean, again, Trump, he's not young. I mean, he's 78. He doesn't look, to be honest, as especially healthy, but he is a very energetic 78-year-old. I mean, you have to be in awe of so much energy, but you have to wonder about things like heart attacks and strokes and everything else. It is a stressful job. So Vance is a good insurance, and if after the midterms, I mean, at the moment, it doesn't look likely that an impeachment would go anywhere, because even if the Democrats win the House and they impeach, given that the Republicans have a majority in the Senate, they just wouldn't even take up the case. They wouldn't have a trial. They would do what Chuck Schumer did when the Republicans impeached Mayorkas. They just said, we're not going to have a trial. We're not taking the case. So I think that's what the Republicans would do. So at the moment, I think that Trump is safe from impeachment. But who knows what happens after the midterms? I mean, if the Democrats, take back the Senate in a couple of years, and they have a majority in the House, yep, absolutely, they will impeach Trump. The economy, yeah, that's a serious problem. But I mean, I think the inflation and the debt and everything else. I would imagine that that Trump obviously he will go for the tax cuts. I mean, that's again, it's a signature Republican policy. He'll go for the tax cut. He will have to go for his big promise, the no tax on tips. And no tax on tips, obviously no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. The the problem with that, of course, is that once people realize that, then people will start adjusting their incomes to minimize their tax liability. So suddenly everything becomes a tip, and of course everything becomes overtime. So so instead of saying, well, these are my regular hours, what you call regular hours is overtime. So there will be a shortfall in tax revenue, I would imagine. But Trump doesn't really care about that. He's never really been a debt person. I mean, I don't even remember he's ever uh, talking about debt in any of his speeches. His supporters talk about debt all the time. Even all the people around Steve Bannon, the sort of the great populists, they're always talking about the debt. But I've never heard Trump talking about the debt. But yeah, that is a problem down the road. But I think he is going to focus on trade, and I think that's going to be his big gamble. That somehow, if he really imposes these tariffs. I mean, that he's going to have to do that. Impose some serious tariffs. He will generate um, income from tariffs, and then of course he will stimulate industrial output in the United States, domestic industrial output in the United States. I mean, that's his gamble. That tariffs will make up any shortfall of revenue, and therefore any inflationary pressures. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, it's a very innovative policy, um, but and again, I think he's going to do cut regulations, which he did during his first term, in the hope that this is going to stimulate economic activity, which it probably does. Um, and so, yeah, that's a. But as I was saying earlier, I think that everything hangs on his being, getting these wars out of the way. Because if he doesn't, I think his whole agenda will be destroyed. He will be once he loses control of Congress, he's not going to get anything done. So this is really his moment. You've got your first 2 years is the only opportunity that you have to enact your agenda. Because after 2 years, you get your midterms, you lose control of Congress, and then you're not going to get anything done. So he's got to wrap it up very quickly, and then try and enact this agenda: the tariffs, the deregulation, and the tax cuts, and see if that does the job. Anyway, thank you so much, Cynthia. And then Cynthia goes on. However, I'm glad these profound, stupid global warming policies. Yeah, that's a very good point. The global policies can and will be reversed. Yep, he's definitely on all gung ho for the fossil fuels reversed, including exiting the Paris Accords. If tensions in the Middle East can simmer down and we get back to drilling, maybe gas prices can retreat a little, yep, which will offset other inflation. Hopefully, Trump can find useful positions for the likes of Musk, RFK, Tulsi, and possibly even Ron Paul. I agree entirely. I think the fossil fuel thing is very important, and I think that's going to stimulate a kind of a worldwide revulsion with the whole global warming scam. Which is just destroying agriculture, it's destroying industry, it's causing serious economic recessions in Europe, and it's already leading to great unpopularity of the Greens. So absolutely, I mean, if Trump can do that, just simply say, I'm not interested in this global warming. We're going to start drilling. If there's oil to be drilled, we're going to drill it. We're going to gas if we can, get as much gas out as fracking, whatever. Just get the gas out. Coal, dig up the coal. Keep all the coal miners employed in West Virginia or everywhere else. He'll go for that, and I think and then I think everyone else is going to follow. Everyone always follows America. They didn't during his first term because Trump really didn't couldn't really enact his agenda in his first term. But this time, I think they'll follow his agenda, and I think on fossil fuels, and I think on immigration. I think that he has to do something on immigration. He has to be seen to be doing. He promised deportations. He's going to have to go through with that. I mean, that might, again, that's a challenge because the courts are going to fight tooth and nail against deportations. But I think he will prevail, much as he prevailed on the immigration issue during his first term, at least as far as putting in restrictions on who can come into the country. I mean, ultimately, he has every right to deport anyone in the country who is there illegally, and the courts will have to support him, because if you're in the country illegally, then you're eligible for deportation. I mean, no ands, ifs, and buts. And to say, oh well, I've got a child here and whatever, everyone who's eligible for deportation will have a sob story as to why they can't be deported. Oh, I have a child, my wife is getting treated in a local hospital and I can't, I won't be able to get this medical treatment in Honduras or whatever. I mean, they've all got sob stories. But he has to show that he's serious. And this, again, is something that he has promised over and over again, that he will carry out mass deportations. So he has to do something about that. Now, admittedly, his first step will probably be to deport the criminals and so on. But he has to be more than that. He can't just simply say, okay, well, we've deported, I don't know, 1,000 criminals. Hey, you promised that you're going to deport 11 million people. I mean, 1,000 hardened criminals, that's nowhere near 11 million. So he's got to, do something serious about that. But what I think would work in his favor is that, given the threat of deportation, I think that it will have an effect, first of all, of that people who are in the country illegally will decide that they want to leave the country. They're not going to take the risk of ICE coming and arresting them and shoving them into detention and then shoving them out of the country. So they'll probably, to use Romney's phrase, from 2012, they will self-deport. So I think that will have an effect. Well, automatically, people are going to leave the country out of fear that they might get deported. So there's that, and I think that just the threat of deportation will have an effect of cutting back on people trying to enter the country. So that it will automatically have an effect, but he's got to carry it out, because if he doesn't, it's seen that he hasn't carried out his deportation threat, then once again there'll be the migrant flow, particularly if he doesn't succeed with the he's got to bring back the Remain in Mexico policy. He's got to bring back the deals that he had struck with El Salvador and others about asylum seekers have to stay there. They can't come into the country and live with their asylum application. So yeah, again, that is a key ingredient of his economic program. I mean, he wants a tight labor market. You want a tight labor market that helps stimulate wage growth, which again is part of his economic agenda. But we talked about the Middle East. That's going to be the difficult one. That's again one of the hardest for him to do. But I was just to finish up on the deportation. I think he will succeed if it's challenged in the courts. Yes, all the lawyers are going to start challenging the administration on deportation, but it'll go up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will say it's the executive branch is within its rights, and acting within its responsibilities to deport anyone who's in the country illegally. That's it's according to the Constitution. If you're in the country illegally, then you have no right to be there, and therefore, it's there's nothing you can do to stop the deportation. I think Musk will have some kind of a role within the administration. I think he'll be, he will be that the thing about the Tsar. He'll be, that. In other words, he won't get one of those cabinet positions that require confirmation by the Senate. I think he'll be like, he'll be the government efficiency Tsar. He'll be there examining all the various government departments and which departments can be eliminated. Presumably he knows something about how to eliminate workers. He's been pretty good at that. So I think he'll do that. I think RFK will probably be, uh, I think the health Tsar. Again, I'm not sure that Trump is going to appoint him the Secretary for Health and Human Services, because that's the kind of thing that requires some administrative ability. I don't know whether RFK has administrative ability, but I don't. Trump may just think, why let him just sort of come up with ideas, and then we'll try to implement these ideas. But I don't know whether he wants to put RFK in charge of a massive department. So I think he will also be like, if Musk is the government efficiency Tsar, I think RFK will be the health Tsar. Tulsi, I would imagine, would be part of his national security team. I can see her as his national security advisor. Though national security advisor is one of those things that you have to have a good personal relationship with the president for that. And I don't know whether she has a particularly good rapport with Trump, but obviously she'd be one of the people in contention as part of his national security team. And again, I think, well, she, on Ukraine, I think she's sensible. Israel, she'll be one of the people urging support for Israel. So I don't think she's good news there. Though again, she might be sensible enough to tell him that, hey, the fastest way to destroy your presidency is if you continue with this war in Gaza, because it's just you become very unpopular very quickly. Ron Paul, that's an interesting one. But Rand Paul would be. I can see Rand Paul getting some kind of a cabinet position. He's particularly on issues of national security, civil liberties. He'd be there. Ron Paul just seems a little, kind of a little elderly, and I'm not sure he's in the best of health. I mean, he had a heart attack a couple of years ago, so I think Ron Paul would be someone who would have input, might give him Trump advice, but Rand Paul would be an interesting choice, and maybe even on issues of health and human services. I mean, Rand Paul is, after all, a certified medical doctor, so he could easily take on something like health and human services. I mean, I read today that Thomas Massey is being considered for Secretary of Agriculture. So he's a kind of a good libertarian. So anyway, and then Cynthia goes on. I'm also happy to refresh the SCOTUS if the situation arises. Yet most of all, I'm utterly thrilled to see the wokesters, Karens, Hollywood crazy cat ladies, and the entire Obama machine with egg on their faces and scurrying off into corners. It's very, very, very well put. Yes, no, absolutely. And thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for your generosity. And yeah, you're right. I mean, the SCOTUS situation is, I think, very good because that it enables Clarence Thomas to retire if he has a mind to. I would imagine Clarence Thomas probably will retire. I don't think he's going to take the risk, after, and do what happens if because who knows, the Democrats might come back in 4 years, and then Clarence Thomas would then be in his 80s, and then he could well die while a Democrat is in the White House, and then, so in other words, he would be the kind of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the right, and that therefore he would be replaced by some Obama creatures. So I would imagine um, Clarence Thomas will at some point, probably towards the end of Trump's term, he will step down. Samuel Alito, I think he would also probably step down before Trump's term comes to an end. The I would imagine that sort of the liberals, who was the liberal? Kagan, Sotomayor, um, and Brown. I think they're going to stick it out. But yeah, I mean that's good. It's a good situation for them to be in, because if Harris had won, then Thomas and Alito's position would have been a little risky. I mean, they obviously wouldn't have retired, but then once you hit 80, you never know what might happen. I mean, remember what happened to Scalia. Scalia died while Obama was president, and Obama got the chance to replace Scalia, and chose Merrick Garland to replace Scalia. So you don't want to be in that position where you just suddenly drop dead, and you've got a political enemy in the White House. So yeah, and about you're absolutely right. The humiliation of Obama is great, and humiliation in every possible way, not just a rejection of the Obama legacy, the sort of the years, the 12 years of Obama, but also the tactic that he adopted, which is to bundle aside Biden, insert Harris, and thinking that thereby he will continue to control the White House. That just blew up in Obama's face and Michelle's face, so that's extremely nice. And yeah, it's very, very nice to see all that, the meltdown of Hollywood and the late night talk show. There's Stephen Colbert and these awful people. So that all of that is very nice. Of course, they never really learn anything from that. They never really figure out, hey, maybe the way we've been demonizing Trump all these years, maybe that wasn't the best way to go. That only just added to Trump's appeal. No, they don't really think that. They just go on bashing the American public, which again, a little bit much, since it's kind of this is how they make their money, and particularly when it comes to the Obamas. It's the American public that you despise so much that makes you rich. Say and so this, same with all the Hollywood. They despise the American public. It's the American public that actually makes them rich. Anyway, thank you so much, Cynthia. Really appreciate that. And as you can see, Cynthia, by the way, that we've got these the film for next week. Next week's movie night. We've got classical music and cinema. So we've got a poll. It's on the on our locals page. So if you haven't voted, please vote. People who voted on Tuesday now have an obligation to vote in this. Which movie you want to watch next Monday? At the moment, in the lead is 2001: A Space Odyssey. But there's a number of other films that you can choose. So please vote. And 60 cents. So always good to see you. It's from Silicon Valley. I'm not sure what the final total. I don't know if the counting is ended in California. But I'd be quite interested what the Harris's final margin in California will be. Whether the margin has sunk as drastically as it did in New York. In New York, the Democrat margin was cut by 50%. So I just wonder what the final tally will be in California. Robert says the hope has to be that the Dems coup against Biden will serve to temper any temptation Biden might have to sabotage the incoming Trump. Well, that is an interesting issue. I mean, I think you're right that I think if you just watching Biden's body language today at the Rose Garden, he seemed really happy. He was in a better mood than I've seen him in a long time. He was grinning and very, very cheerful. And I'm sure the Democrats noticed his radiant good mood. He didn't have the somber tone that Obama had in 2016 when his little plan to install Hillary failed. That Biden was in a very good mood. And yeah, you're right. That could well have the effect that he's not going to try and sabotage Trump between now and January. But the people who might want to sabotage Trump, they're still in power. And I think they will try to do whatever they can. I would think that the most effective way, I mean, but maybe there are other ways of doing, is to escalate things in Ukraine. Try to get as much to get as much weaponry to Zelensky as possible, and to encourage Zelensky to be as aggressive as possible. So I think that it may happen that they will take the restraints off Ukraine as to the use of long-range missiles on Russian territory, because that's an escalatory step. And then again, then you've got a real mess on your hands, a real disaster, because then Russia will say, hey, this effectively America has declared war against us. And then that's going to be a real problem for Trump. Trump will come in on January the 20th, and he's really on the brink of war with Russia. So I think that is a danger. I think that they will try to sabotage any possible peace deal that Trump might want to engage in. So that, I think, that is a real danger. I think but that doesn't depend on Biden. I don't think Biden makes any of these decisions. I think that's going to be decision taken at a different level by Blinken and the rest of them. I don't think Biden will take that decision. But I think that's a real danger, which is a real escalation of the war in Ukraine. And Robert, so Danaki asks, very good question, who's going to face Vance in 2028? Yeah, I mean, I think we can agree that it'll be Vance, at least at this stage. I think Vance is a shoo-in for 2028. I would imagine that it's going to be one of those governors. I think it's going to be Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer. I think Gavin Newsom. I think there would be the front runners for that. I mean, I can't think of anyone in Washington who stands out as a kind of a potential leader of the Democrats. I think both Sanders and Pocahontas, I think, will be too old by 2028. So I think it's going to be one of the one of the governors. But I would think probably if I had to take a guess, I'd probably think it'll be Josh Shapiro. I think Gavin Newsom is a real problem. Is that he's carrying the burden of California, and doesn't really do anything because the Democrats will take California anyway, so they don't really need to have the governor of California as the head of the ticket. Pennsylvania and Michigan, I mean, they're still in play. So I think that's why I think it's probably either Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer. I mean, if I was to take a bet, I'd probably say it was Gretchen Whitmer. I think the Democrats, then they're not going to just pass up the opportunity to have a woman. I mean, it's now that slot as the nominee is now it's guaranteed for a woman. So I put my money on Gretchen Whitmer, slightly. So yeah, I think it's very hard for the Democrats now to insert a white male. It's just you just can't be done. I mean, you can do a white male if he's gay, but I think just a straight white male like Gavin Newsom or Josh Shapiro, I think it's going to be hard for the Democrats. And the 60 Cents says, with the rest of California back in the 1980s passed the enabling legislation that allowed the establishment of the California Lottery, which was reportedly intended in part to fund public schools. However, ever since the measures and propositions are voted on that increase are property taxes. For example, my home's property tax is about $12,000 per year. And now with a local measure for local high schools that just passed, that will increase by an additional $500. Yeah. Yeah, I think that yeah, it's another reason why I don't think Gavin Newsom is in a good position. I mean, I think that it's precisely the examples like that they say we don't want California. We don't want the rest of the country becoming like California. But this is all the other aspects of California, which is the it's extraordinary kind of immigration policy with providing government services to immigrants, and so all of those are good reasons why I think Gavin Newsom is not in a good position to be the Democratic nominee. I mean, you just can't win an election. If you're governor of California, you cannot win a national election. Anyway, so then Danaki says, apparently the Trump camp published a sort of letter outlining his plan for the Ukraine war, which includes Ukraine abandoning NATO aspirations. Yeah, I saw that, and I mean that was already J.D. Vance kind of hinted at that, but it just doesn't really mean a great deal because the problem with the NATO aspirations is that the way it's been formulated is that, well, you can't join NATO now, but once the war comes to an end, then you can join NATO. But that, of course, is a ridiculous position, as Ukraine repeatedly pointed out, which is, well, we need NATO now. Once the war is over, once we've lost the war, we don't really need NATO at that stage. So to get around this problem, they basically forced Ukraine to sign all these bilateral agreements, the bilateral commitments, so that if Ukraine is involved in a war, then everybody has to come to its aid. So in effect, NATO is Ukraine is de facto a member of NATO, and I think that's probably what that really means. You give up your NATO aspirations because that's just going to be too problematic. Getting you in, and it's unlikely that all NATO member states are going to agree to this. And so that's on the other hand, we can get these bilateral agreements, which means that effectively, even if you start this war, and I imagine Ukraine would start this war again down the road, since I don't think they're going to accept the loss of the good part of the Donbass, then if you start the war, then basically these states that you've signed these bilateral agreements will probably have to enter the war. So in effect, it'll be NATO membership. I mean, even if you're a fully fledged NATO member state, the rest of NATO isn't going to do anything more for you than NATO is doing for Ukraine. So it's not like if Ukraine joined NATO, somehow Ukraine would get more out of NATO than it is. That's all NATO membership does for you. You get a lot of weaponry, you get training and so on, but there's no commitment actually to go to war on your behalf. So it doesn't mean much to say, well, give up your NATO aspirations if the Americans go on funding you and arming you, which I think even Trump would do. Trump, if he can get a ceasefire, some ceasefire along the line of contact, Trump would go on arming Ukraine. Trump would just go on providing weaponry. I don't think Trump would stop. There's just no way that Trump, I think, would just cut Ukraine off. He could threaten. He'll threaten to cut Ukraine off to get this agreement, but then once he gets the agreement, he will continue to arm Ukraine. So I think that's particularly that's where it's heading. It's going to be difficult to do, but I think Russia will take the deal. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, Russia will never take the deal." I think Russia will take the deal. I think Russia will realize that that this war has been going on for 3 years, and it doesn't, unless it launches a full mobilization, which Putin is obviously very reluctant to do, and he's not going to do it. He hasn't done it all this time. He's not going to do it now. Unless Russia does this, then essentially this war would just go on and on and on without any prospect of a successful conclusion. So I think Putin will be very tempted to take some kind of a deal, and there could be some sweeteners in there. As I say, one sweetener obviously will be the Trump would lift some of the sanctions on Russia, and then another sweetener might be if Trump persuades Ukraine to to provide some protections for the Russian population. Say if he says, okay, we will insert in the constitution that no Nazis can hold any official positions in the Ukraine government, and we will make Russian an official language. I mean, I don't know whether they'd go for it, but something like that. If you say, well, I'll make Russia, well, if you say, if he puts that into the constitution, Putin can then turn around and say, yeah, well, we achieved what we wanted. We got denazification. I mean, I think once you can say we're going to protect the Russian language, Putin will hail that as denazification. Well, that was one of our goals, denazification. Look, Russian has been recognized as an official language of Ukraine. So something like that. If Trump can persuade Zelensky to change the constitution, that might help bring the war to an end. I mean, but it's still speculative. But I do think Russia wants to end this war. I think Putin wants to end this war. I don't think this war has been a success, to say the least, for Russia. And therefore this could just be a way out. And then Putin can say, hey, we've achieved some of our goals. We've acquired territory. We've got additional territory that we've got. We've got a buffer zone. We probably installed a buffer zone, so we've got some security, and we got the Ukrainians to change the constitution so that the Russian language is protected, and they absolutely promise that they won't have any Nazis in official positions in Ukraine. So something like that, I think, could be done. Doesn't mean they will be done, but I think Trump would go for something like that. I think Putin would go for something like that. I don't know about Zelensky though, but Zelensky has limited number of cards to play. I think he's so dependent on the Americans that he's not in a good position to balk at such a deal. Anyway, 60 cents, dear George. Here's the doggy tax. Somehow it could not be attached to my earlier note. So thank you so much, 60 cents. I feel very I have to commiserate with you. Living in Newsom land, it can't be much fun. I mean, there's some sympathy. I mean, I kind of liked Silicon Valley when I lived there, back in the 90s in Palo Alto. But I think it's much worse now than, I mean, even then it was kind of problematic. I mean, California is a nice place in terms of its scenery and its climate, though I can't say I like Californians all that much. I think it's even worse now. But anyway, thank you so much, 60 cents. Appreciate that. Danaki says, line of contact still means to this day Ukraine occupation of part of Kursk. That's a very good point. I would have to assume that would be part of a land swap deal. Ukraine would withdraw from Kursk, in which case Russia would also have to hand back some territory in Ukraine as part of the deal, and there would have to be a land swap. So Ukraine gives up land in Russia. Russia's going to have to give up land in Ukraine. How much land, I don't know, but that's the only way it could be done. That would be part of a land swap. Anne Marie, thank you so much for your generosity. Good evening, George and everyone. I really appreciate that. I hope, Anne Marie, you've voted in the poll for classical music and cinema, and I hope you approved of the my selection of films. I mean, there have been a number of films that feature classical music, so I picked those 8, but there were easily another 8 that I could have chosen. So I hope you approve of my choice. Anyway, Danaki says, but isn't it a bit embarrassing for Russia to be relying on Iranian drones, North Korean shells, and now soldiers, and then on Trump coming to a face-saving compromise? I agree. I absolutely agree. I think that's and each of those things are much more useful to North Korea than they are to Russia. I mean, I think there's a limited amount of help that North Korea can provide. And North Korea is the one that gets the benefit of this deal. Is going to get cut price oil, cut price gas, and essentially a Russian commitment to come to North Korea's side should it get involved in a war with South Korea and the United States. And Russia's now on the hook for that. I mean, North Korea, hey, we came through for you. We formed a strategic partnership. We're here as your ally. We may not do anything. They're probably not going to do anything. They're not. I don't think they're not going to get involved in the fighting. But now you're obligated to come to our side when we get involved in a fight. And same with Iran. Hey, well, we came through for you. That's a lot more than the other, your version of NATO. I mean, Kazakhstan didn't come through for you. Armenia didn't come through for you. We did. So the Collective Security Treaty Organization, none of them did anything for Russia. Nothing. So but Iran and North Korea, yeah, they've done something. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's this North Korea, Iran, and then Trump. Trump is essentially Russia's best hope of kind of bringing this war to an end, because otherwise this is just going to go on and on unless Russia launches a mobilization. But at the moment, Russia has as many forces in Ukraine, the same number as Ukrainian forces. I mean, which is why ultimately, its progress, what progress there is as slow as it is. It's not really making its huge numerical advantage felt because it hasn't mobilized. Ukraine has mobilized, so that's why the numbers are pretty much the same. How many Ukraine forces Ukraine has on the field, and how many Russia's. I mean, they both have about 500,000 in the field. So. Yeah. So when you say it's a face saving, that's it. I think that's why I think Trump is their last best hope. If that fails, if the Trump plan fails, then I think Russia's got to really make a very serious decision. I mean, is it really going to go on fighting another 3 years, or is it going to launch a mobilization? And I don't know whether how the Russian people are going to feel about that. So yeah, I mean, your point is right. It's essentially relying on some kind of a face-saving compromise, so that say, okay, well, we got something out of it. It's questionable whether the loss of lives is remotely justifiable, but yeah. Anyway, Donaghy goes on, didn't esteemed analysts like Escobar and Martyanov extol the virtues of the best military in the world, assuring us for the past 2+ years, there's just a matter of weeks, days, hours, minutes till the inevitable triumphant Russian victory. Yeah, no, I mean, we heard that from the beginning. We heard that from the earliest days of the so-called special military operation. Yeah, it's just any minute now. Any minute now, it's all going to be over. Any minute that Ukraine will collapse. But how long have we heard that Ukraine is on the brink of collapse? So this is, I mean, again, and we've talked about this so many times here, which is, Ukraine might collapse, but there's no evidence of this. It's just not. It doesn't look like it's on the brink of collapse. So this is really the. I think this is the best hope. Trump's victory is the best hope for bringing this Ukraine war to an end. If this doesn't work, then I think it's very bleak. Good. And that means the longer a war goes on, the more the more terrible things that could happen. I mean, there's just all sorts of possibilities. Very dire possibilities could happen. So this is the last best hope of bringing it to some kind of a conclusion, and then of course we can assess whether this war was worth undertaking. Anyway, Cynthia goes on. I hope Amadeus doesn't win this week's movie poll, or even just come in second for that matter. The thought of listening to the Mozart impersonator's stupid, obnoxious laugh for 2.5 hours or so is just far too much for me to take, especially given that the real Mozart likely didn't laugh that way at all. I agree with you about that. I did it because obviously most people, I chose the film because, most people think of it as the exemplar of a classical movie in cinema. But I found the whole thing repulsive, to be honest, because I just didn't like the way of presenting Mozart as some kind of an idiot. That somehow he was just this idiot who had this great genius, and that we can just mock him and think, God, what a ridiculous person. I didn't like that part of it at all. I don't think he was like that. I mean, it made it ridiculous. They made him out to be ridiculous, which I never like. The man's a towering genius. I mean, you just have to say this is so, and making him out to be such a complete idiot is obnoxious, and the whole theme of the film, that somehow it's justifiable to poison a genius because you're somehow just an ordinary talent. You're not really a great genius, and you're an ordinary talent, and therefore you have some sense of grievance, a legitimate grievance that you were not blessed by God, and that therefore you can, it's justifiable to poison a genius, because he's so, this genius is such an obnoxious, horrible person, whereas you, a respectable, stately person, you have the right to do so. So I found the film obnoxious. I like the music, but I did find the film to be very obnoxious. It was definitely not one of my favorite films. Just I like the music is one thing, but the film itself is. Anyway, Marty, good to see you, and thank you so much. I really appreciate your generosity. DJ, also appreciate um, your generosity. The dogs, the dogs, you know, the dogs should appreciate. I keep telling them, you got to look. There are people who are being generous. You got to be. How about a little bit of gratitude? But they don't. That's not how they don't think in that way. Um, and then and we have R Brown 1958 says maybe FJB got 12 million more votes in 2020 from the dementia Alzheimer's wing of the party, and they forgot to vote this time. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they're so out of it that they forgot. Oh, was there an election? I didn't know. Nobody told me. Anyway, R. Brown goes on. Trump can work with the Republican governor states to some degree to deport illegals, either to Mexico or Dem states. He can also force Mexico to block new illegals by EU and take back the deported. No, I agree. I think he can do it if he goes ahead with doing that. I think he will. I think the governors may not want to cooperate with him, but the law is on his side, and I think that if they try to resist as they did during his first term, or we won't cooperate with ICE and so on, the courts will have to side with the president. There's no such thing as somehow safe. What was the word they had? Safe, not safe havens, or there was some term that they coined back then. So, and then R. Brown says the Republicans in the Senate were able to block Garland in 2016, which allowed Trump to put Gorsuch on the court. Yep. Mitch McConnell's only positive contribution to Trump's first term was pretty big, 3 new justices. No, I agree. That was something. I mean, because it was Scalia dropping dead like that gave Obama this glorious opportunity to replace Scalia, and it was a gamble. It was a gamble on McConnell's part, because if the election had gone the other way and Hillary Clinton had won, she would have put somebody else on. She wouldn't have stuck with Merrick Garland. I mean, she would have put somebody like Lawrence Tribe onto the court, and he would have gone through. So that was Mitch McConnell. That was his moment, his heroic moment. R. Brown says, at the current pace of vote counting, there's a good chance Arizona will complete their 2024 vote count before the 2028 election. Yeah, I think so. And then. And then R. Brown says, I find your discussions to be very therapeutic. Oh, that's good. Thank you. There are so many whack jobs in the mainstream US media. It's nice to have a regular contact with sane people like you and other gagglers. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I absolutely agree with you. It's exactly my feeling. We have a very good, thoughtful, intelligent audience here. And then MRD says, the misconception that artists never do any work and rely on godly talent, drinking wine and meeting women all the time, is still present nowadays regarding the Mozart. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's part of why the film was so obnoxious. Oh, he's just a genius. So apparently, God just sort of transmits his ideas through you, and you don't actually have to do any work. You just get, here's a piece of paper, pen, and then you scribble, and everybody else has to slog away at it. And then I think the film kind of obnoxiously suggests that, then you're sort of justified because Mozart is such an awful creature, and he's so horrible, and it comes across like a complete idiot. So therefore, we lesser talents can basically get rid of him, because it's just so unfair. It's so unfair that a person as idiotic as that should be blessed with this great talent. And I think whether that was what the playwright Schaeffer actually wanted to say or not, that's the impression that he gave in his play. So I really I didn't like it. That just the music. Yeah, that's something else. But that wasn't. But anyway, I have to um, now go. I have to do a thing about this thing in Hungary today with Viktor Orban, this European political community. It's this nonsense. So I have to do an interview on that. So thank you very much, everybody who joined me. Please, please, please vote in the cinema and the classical music poll, so that we get, we select the right thing. Cynthia's already made clear she doesn't want Amadeus to win. At the moment, it's number one is 2001 Space Odyssey, but number two is Amadeus. So I kind of agree with Cynthia. Let's push Amadeus down a few notches in the poll. But anyway, thank you very much, everybody who joined me. Thank you above all to everybody who tipped so generously. I have to face the dogs tomorrow. Always a brutal time. They just they have utter contempt for me. They don't have any respect for anything that I do. So it's always I have to go hat in hand when I talk to the dogs. But anyway, thank you everybody who contributed. I really appreciate that. So we will be back. We have a live stream with Peter on Monday, and then I'm going to do the usual solo next Tuesday. So I hope to see you all then. Thank you, and all the best. Good night. Bye-bye.